Greetings, salutations, and welcome to Sportslook, the sports television program for the High Plains of West Texas and eastern New Mexico. I'm your host, Doc Elder, and this year on Sportslook, we've got a new boss at K&W. We've got a new set. Tonight, we're going to have a new football coach as our first guest. We're going to have a new member of the New Mexico Sports Hall of Fame as our second guest. But we kind of like the old format, and as such, I'll start out with an Eastern recap. Greyhound football in action even as we speak. Their opening game against New Mexico Highlands. Let's hope the Greyhounds get a victory. Greyhound volleyball, they're going to open the season tomorrow. They've got a two-day tournament in Wichita Falls. Greyhound soccer playing today. The men are in Colorado. Greyhound women's soccer, they're also playing today in Colorado. We haven't heard the results of those matches. Greyhound cross country, they open up the season next weekend with the Lori Ferguson Invitational. And Greyhound rodeo, their first rodeo will be the College Days Rodeo, September 14th, 15th, and 16th. Well, that has been your Eastern recap, so we'll clear this out and I'll bring in my first guest, Kelly Lee, right now. Welcome back to Sportslook, and we welcome back to the set of Sportslook the head coach of Eastern New Mexico University Greyhound football, Kelly Lee. And Kelly, welcome back to Sportslook.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Kelly, of course, this is your second time as the head coach. You're kind of the Bill Snyder of Eastern New Mexico University, a legendary coach, and then you come back. Looking back at your first time here at Eastern, there were many things I'm sure you could point to as being highlights. On the field, off the field, but if you had to say there was one thing you were most proud of during your first tenure as the head coach, what would you point to?
Probably the reputation that our kids had of playing with such a fanatical effort, playing so hard. We weren't always the biggest, maybe not the fastest, but I don't think there was very many people that ever questioned our toughness, and we were able to win a lot of games that way, and that's probably the thing that I'm most proud of.
Of course, I'll always remember the way that your season ended up the last year that you were the head coach, your first time here, when we had gotten off to a fast start. We'd lost a few games, kind of seemed to be treading water, and you finished up with 2 regular season wins, and you won a bowl game.
Yeah, we were sitting at 5-4 after a good start, and we had Angelo State coming to town. I think they were like 10th in the country and 7-1 at the time, or 8-1, headed to the playoffs, and we beat them in an overtime game, and that was a big upset. And then we went on the road to Western Oregon to play last game of the regular season versus the GNAC champs. They were in a different conference at that time, and they were conference champs, and we won a big game there. And of course, that got us a bowl game, and then we faced a very good Southern Arkansas team and was able to get a win there. So finished the year with 3 big wins over nationally ranked, really tough opponents, all 3 in a row, and that obviously highlighting the first postseason win in Eastern history. But really, the 3 wins there at the end of the season was phenomenal.
And of course, during your years as the head coach, you had a lot of really good ball players. I'm not even going to ask who the best athlete was, because we'd be here all night just talking about who that could be. But if you had to point to one kid that really exemplified Greyhound spirit, not necessarily the best athlete, but the kid who just bled green day in and day out, who is the one kid you would say exemplified?
I don't know if you could just do one there either, but we had some quarterbacks, Jeremy Berman, Wyatt Strand, that were all in on everything we did, and we had some defensive players like Seth Bailey and Kevin Reeves, some great. There's just a lot of them, obviously Kamal Cass and Elon Spite, Paul Terry. The list goes on and on, but Jacob Johnson's another kid, that phenomenal receiver that was a great blocker that comes to mind. But we always had those kids that were really all about Eastern, and when we played in the Wagon Wheel, that was their Texas A&M, and our games and our culture and our season was just important to them as anything you would see on TV anywhere else. So really always fond of those guys.
When you left Eastern, did you think that you'd ever be back in the college coaching ranks, or were you kind of the opinion that you'd be a high school coach moving forward?
Well, I've always in my career I've kind of gone back and forth between high school and college. So I wouldn't say that I never. I had a pretty good opportunity there in Texas coaching high school football, and that's there's a lot of resources and a lot of abilities that you have there, and it was really nice. I definitely didn't think I'd ever be back in Eastern New Mexico. That wasn't really in the plan, or even I thought that would be an option, and it just kind of worked out that it was, and we're thrilled to be back.
And obviously, when the job opened up, Paul Weir, our athletic director, I understand, kind of reached out and said, "Well, if you'd like to throw your hat in the ring, we'd certainly give you consideration." So, why did you want to throw your hat back in the
Well,
ring?
I think my family had a lot of friends here, and my kids had friends here, and I'm a New Mexico native, and Eastern's just a special place for our family, and definitely missed the time being gone, and wanted to see the Greyhounds get back to where they were, when we left, and just felt like the time was right, and had some new leadership that saw that there was definitely a vision for growing the athletic department and the university with Dr. Ware and Dr. Johnston, and kind of was sold on their thoughts on things, and it felt like it was the right time and right fit to return home.
And the good thing was that there were a bunch of kids that you had recruited that still had eligibility, and a lot of them opted to come back and play for you.
Yeah, we had some guys that played for us. Some of those guys have been here 6 years now with the red shirt and the COVID. And Hunter St. John, Kevin McCracken, two of our captains come to mind. But there's a host of others: Sam Petrosky and Brock Bedford, Bailey Adair. We've had some guys that left the program and now came back. Rashad Carter, Justin Carrasco, and so yeah, it was kind of a homecoming for them and for us as well.
And what was the one message that you got from the returning players? What did they want to see from you? And what was the one message that you gave to the returning players? What did you want to see from them?
Well, I had a lot of talks with the returners, the ones I knew, asking their opinion because they'd seen how we did it, how it was done, what they thought we needed to do. And kind of just a unanimous thought was they just wanted to get back to playing Greyhound football. And so then I would pose the question, what does that mean? And so it was very exciting to hear that some of our core tenets, the things that we hold dearly and are important, were the things that they were voicing. A lot of discipline. They wanted to be tough. They wanted to play harder than people, and they wanted to be able to run the football and stop the run, and just those things that we always preached. And I think they were yearning for that, and so that you kind of knew that it was going to be able to kind of turn things around and get going again. So that was music to our ears, so to speak.
And from the players, did you tell them you wanted them to be accountable? You wanted them to play as a team, or was there kind of a whole slew of things that you wanted to
There's a
impart to
few
them?
things. I mean, I think you start your expectations, and then you get right into off season, and you start holding people accountable. And I think they knew right away that things were a little different. I mean, there was definitely a standard that there was an expectation, but we leaned on some of those older guys that knew what our expectations were to set an example, and they did a great job of that. And I think that was easier for the other guys to have that visual of what we wanted, the effort we wanted, the discipline we wanted, and so that helped out a lot.
And speaking of helping out a lot, you were able to recommend an individual to be a strength and conditioning coach who would definitely motivate me. I'm sure he's motivating you guys as well.
Yeah, Corey Bell, mutual coaching friends and community. When we had a strength opening, had highly recommended him, and we were able to talk and quickly knew that we were going to align philosophically, and he would be the right perfect fit for not only our football program but for all our athletes here at Eastern, and feel real fortunate to have gotten him on board, and for Dr. Ware letting us, move fast to get him here in place because that off season was so important. And I think, I know we've benefited from him being here, but I think our entire athletic program has.
And it's kind of cool. I've been talking to you prior to Sportslook, and I found out that while there'll be some new coaches that have come along with you, there's some people that Eastern New Mexico University fans will recognize the names of because they've been here in various roles.
Yeah, we've got a couple returning. Oliver Sukup comes to mind first. Our assistant head coach, defensive coordinator, was here from 2012 to I believe 15. helped us turn around the program, win a conference championship, and spent some time in New Mexico State. And we were able to get him back as our defensive coordinator. And we're going to be tough on defense. You know, I think your team's going to take on the personality of your coordinators, and if our defense does that, I know they're going to be tough. And so we're thrilled to get him back. Also, Ben Langford, who played here, coached with us as a graduate assistant, then a full-time coach on both offense and defense. Had actually left here to join the military. He came from a military family, and he was getting out of the military and had a chance to hire him back. And then he's going to coach our secondary. Coach Edgar Weiser is a new name to us, but he's a former Greyhound. Played here. He's from Las Cruces. He had been the special teams coordinator at Idaho State, and now he's special teams coordinator at Eastern New Mexico. Also coaches our running back. So some definitely some alums, some guys with former ties to playing here and coaching here, and some that have coached here in the past. And we were able to add a few more guys to the staff and hire some of our former players as graduate assistants. Sully Finau is doing a great job with our offensive line, played for us. And then Caden Merrill, who also played for us, is doing a good job helping out with our linebackers. So a lot of guys that bleed green and silver on our staff.
And Coach will actually look a little bit ahead in the schedule because you open up the season with 2 non-conference games. Ironically, the second non-conference game against a team that is going to be coming into the conference, Sullivan State. But looking at the conference, do you think that the precinct polls are kind of accurate, or are you
Well,
kind of thinking that it's good bulletin board
I
material?
don't know in today's day and age with the transfer portal and things. I don't know how that those polls could ever really be accurate. All I know is last time we were ranked this low, we won the conference. So I'm going to take it as a good sign. You know, I think it gives your kids something to play for, chip on their shoulder, and we're not going to worry too much about stuff before. You know, there's perception, there's reality. I think those polls are perception, and the reality is what we are at the end of the season. You know, and we're going to focus on the reality and the process along the way.
Well, Coach, final question for you here on this Thursday evening. If there's one thing that you hope people who come out and watch you in person, go to Greyhound Stadium or go to an away game, if there's one thing that you hope those people walk away from the game thinking about the Greyhounds, what's the one takeaway you want?
I hope that at the end of the game, they feel like the guys in the green and silver played harder than the other team. Um, we've won a lot of games by just playing harder than our opponent, and everyone talks about it. But I think that we promote it. You know what I mean? We don't permit people to not play hard. We reward guys that do play hard, and even if they might not be our best players, if we have some players that don't give great effort, they're not going to get on the field for us. So, if we're not playing harder than other teams, we're going to have a hard time. So I hope that when our fans and our alumni and parents and everyone watch the Greyhounds play, you say that team plays harder than the other team. And that's something we stress and we're going to hang our hat on. And the other thing is we're going to be tough, both physically and mentally. Going back to what you first said, the first thing that I talked to the team at the time, I said, some of you just honestly are not going to be tough enough to be a Greyhound football player. I mean, that's just the reality of it. We're going to find out through the off season and stuff who is. But some of you aren't. It's not going to be for you. There's other ways to play football, and the way that Greyhounds play it is physically, and both mentally and physically toughness. So those are the things, the physical, mental toughness in our effort.
Well, Coach, congratulations on getting the head job again. Wish you the best of luck, and let's hope this is another one of those years where we defy the odds and come in first place.
Let's hope so. Thank you, Doc.
All right, well, that is going to wrap up our first interview segment, so we'll clear the set and we'll bring on our second guest, Jennifer Poyer, right now. Welcome back to Sportslook, and an honor and a privilege to bring to the set of Sportslook one of the greatest women's basketball players, one of the greatest volleyball players in Eastern New Mexico University school history, Jennifer Poyer. And Jennifer, really honored to have you here.
Thank you. That was very nice. Thank you very much.
Well, Jennifer, I assume that most people who even kind of have a tangential knowledge of Eastern sports know a little bit about you, but for people who may not be familiar, where were you from originally, and what was the process that got you to Eastern?
I was a military brat, so I moved around a lot, but we ended up in San Antonio, Texas. went to John Marshall High School, and actually in middle school, my friend Nikki she was like, "Hey, that looks fun. Let's go try out." And I'm like, "Okay." So we did, and I didn't play very much when I was first playing growing up. The first couple of years playing, but I just worked hard and got better. Um, and when I was in San Antonio, my senior year, I was being recruited by a lot of different places, especially for basketball. I was doing volleyball, basketball, and choir at the time, so I kind of had to choose, and I ended up choosing basketball. But um, a lot of the coaches that I talked to Division I schools and Division II schools, and they weren't. It wasn't the kind of coach. I don't know. There just wasn't a good fit. And my coach, my high school coach, Steve White, um, he played golf actually at Eastern New Mexico University in the 50s, I think. And he kind of tilted his head. And he was like, "Yeah, have you ever heard of Eastern New Mexico University?" And I hadn't, but he suggested Coach Moore. And when I met Coach Moore, I was like, "Oh yeah, totally good fit." It was just so genuine, probably the most genuine person I've ever met. But he has this he has this thing that he does to freshmen, or that he did to freshmen. Um, like one of the first practices, he pulls this picture out of his wallet, and it's this like really unattractive woman. He's like, "This is my wife. Isn't she beautiful?" And of course, as a freshman, was all, "Yeah, she's
Yes.
totally pretty, coach." And he thought that was hilarious. And yes, I fell for it. But of course, Linda, she's just beautiful. Anyway, but I was working through preseason practice. We just finished a basketball practice, and I was leaving the locker room, and I was walking by the gym, and I heard the volleyball team playing, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds fun," and I kind of peeked in, um, and I was watching them for a little bit, and I was like, "Oh, I feel like I could do this too." So I talked to Coach Moore and Coach McGuire and asked if I could play, and they were like, "Okay, keep your grades up." And I did. So yeah, that's how I started playing both sports here.
And obviously, both of those guys, legendary coaches. In what way were they similar? In what ways were they two completely different
Oh
entities?
gosh. Well, Coach Moore, yeah, he was like when he'd get upset with us, he'd carve this part in his head. And, and Coach McGuire would just shake his head and talk, Trish said. But Coach Moore, he was that's a really hard question, Doc. I know, like from a team standpoint, there was our volleyball teams. There were, and volleyball tends to be like a really mental sport.
Yep.
So our teams were, one year we were, warming up singing Brady Bunch songs, and then the next year, we wouldn't. But I think one thing that Coach McGuire did really well was like let us like each team had its own personality. He was totally okay with that. And Coach Moore is a little more regimented, but it was very structured. I did get to play with my sister. My sister came here. We actually came here on a visit together when we were coming to see what Eastern was all about. Um, and I got to play with her for 3 years. So that was awesome. And we looked a lot alike. And my sister, there was one time I missed the game because I was injured. And they said I scored 28 points, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, you're in the paper when you're not even playing." It was kind of funny, but she was such a great support for me while I was playing, and I really enjoyed that time. I think one of the hard times though was when we were in basketball. Um, we would fight a lot, and when they just stopped putting us against each other, because if she was guarding me or I was guarding her, it was like foul, 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 foul. And Coach Moore he told us to stop, and we were just still going. So she and I had to stand in the middle of the court while everybody else ran sprints, and that was horrible. But then we didn't, that helped. But yeah, I don't know if I should say that out loud.
You just did. We've got it on tape.
Yay!
Well, Jen, we have you here for a special reason, not only because we really like you and because you're famous, but you're one of the most recent inductees into the New Mexico Sports Hall of Fame. And what was it like when you found that out?
uh, at first I was like, "Am I being punked? Is this for real?" But wow, what an honor! Just totally humbling. And at first when I found out, people were asking, "Well, who are you being inducted with?" I'm like, "Oh, well, this lady who invented sliced bread, and this guy who invented water." And I mean, it was such an amazing class. And just to be a part of that, when we were up there talking about all of the, everybody was giving their speech, and they had the video that showed, history and talking about everything. And I mean, the man that invented Univision, or that started Univision, founded it, a woman who actually coached at Highlands when I was playing, and she was on the New Mexico Redheads, which was like the Harlem Globetrotters.
Yes.
The all women's team, and they would play men's teams, and
they all were
they would beat them,
Yes,
exactly. Yeah. And
I played against one of those teams.
Oh my gosh.
Midwest.
It was just, and of course, Ty Murray was, he's like Michael Jordan of rodeo. If you don't know rodeo, Ty Murray is like, oh my gosh. But it would just to be considered in that same class is like, are you sure? Me, it was very, very honored. Very cool, though, that this class was the first class ever that had 3 women inducted, and I'm the first player, from Eastern, the first athlete from Eastern New Mexico University and the eastern side of the state. So, and being a woman, that was kind of cool, But I do think that this, their organization is a tremendous organization, and there's so many amazing people that work really hard to make this happen. And I think Eastern will see more just from what I've seen and how they talk about everything. And it was really a really wonderful experience.
And of course, we will point out that you talked about the fact when you were younger, you did choir and you did volleyball and you did basketball. One of the great things about going to basketball games and broadcasting games was when you were here, a lot of times you would sing the Star Spangled Banner. And if you had wanted to concentrate on choir, you could have been all conference in that as well.
Thanks. No, I really enjoy music. And music has a way, of it kind of sort of breaks through boundaries when you're just with emotions and everything else. It just kind of breaks down walls and helps you connect with whatever you're working on or talking to somebody you're talking to. Or yeah, I really enjoy music. Even now, it's a staple in my world.
You still have a very melodic voice.
Oh, thanks.
Well, in case people are thinking, what an amazing coincidence. We've got a guest on the show whose last name is Poyer, and we also have a volleyball coach whose last name is Poyer. 2 of you are actually married.
Yes. And so he was my coach. However, he was my boyfriend before he was my coach. We were going out a whole year, and I was actually the one that suggested he coach, because we played on that volleyball court. We played pickup games outside of Burnley Hall, and he would say, you should try this with your approach. And I'm like, it totally worked, and it's like, why are you not coaching? This is insane. You're so good at this. Yeah, and we talked to Coach McGuire, and he said, well, it was, as long as you keep it professional, you can do that. So we did. And then we ended up getting married after my last season of volleyball. And during preseason, we were warming up and we were talking about the wedding. And one of the players, Holly, she said, when do we get to meet this lucky fellow? I'm like, Holly, you know him. So, it was Sia. But yeah, it was, we kept it professional. But it's kind of a scandal. Like I was like, Coach McGuire, you can't just tell people like we got married. You have to like explain that whatever, that we were going out before. It wasn't, like I dated my coach, even though I was dating my coach.
It wasn't quite like that. Yes, yeah. Exactly. Now you've provided
Right.
the context, so now it's important.
And he is coaching, and we don't, because I have very strong opinions about volleyball, and so I mostly keep them to myself because that makes for a happy home. So when people ask me about volleyball, I'm like, I don't really know. I'm just, you should ask Coach. But my niece is playing this year, so that's really cool to see her going from little to now she's like this amazing athlete. And she came here and I get to watch her play.
Absolutely. Jennifer, I know it's going to be difficult, but if you had to say there was one basketball highlight and one volleyball highlight for you, what was the epitome of your experience in those 2 sports?
Gosh. Okay. So one that comes to mind for volleyball was winning the conference tournament. That was just awesome because we were, we fought so hard for it, and we were a team that really worked together and worked really hard, and everybody was just playing out of their gourds. It was awesome. That whole experience was wonderful. And with basketball, this is a little more, we played, I think it was Angelo had a coach who thought I was overrated, and she said as much in the newspaper. And we were warming up, not before the game. We would go the day before the game and have our shoot around, and then we would go back and rest and everything and play the next day. So we were having our shoot around, and Coach Moore brings me this newspaper, and he's like, "Hey, Go Bowl, you want to read this? Look what that coach said." And I read it, and he was, "You think she's right?" I said, "No." He goes, "I don't think she's right." And then that was it, And then the next game, I ended up scoring like 36 points and the game-winning shot, on the buzzer. And the coach came up to me after the game. She goes, "I was wrong about you." And she shook my hand. She said, "You're an excellent player." And I said, "Thank you very much." And I told him, I said, "Coach, that really fired me up." He's like, "I knew it would." That's why I showed it to you. Yeah, but.
Well, Jennifer, seriously, I've had the privilege of knowing you for 29 years.
Oh my gosh.
I know that seems like just yesterday, but just a real honor for us at Eastern New Mexico University that you're the first Eastern athlete to go into the New Mexico Sports Hall of Fame. Congratulations on your success.
Thank you. Thanks very much. It was awesome.
All right. Well, that is going to wrap up our second interview segment. So what we'll do is we'll clear the set and I'll finish up with an overtime right now. Kelly Lee was my first guest tonight. He's been a pretty successful football coach at Eastern New Mexico University, but as good as Kelly is, he's not the best football coach yet that we've had. That honor belonged to a guy by the name of Carl Richardson. Back in 1957, Carl guided the Greyhound football team to an undefeated season. They finished 4th in the nation that year in the national rankings. In addition to being a great football coach, Carl, at one time or another, was also the golf coach. He was also the tennis coach. He was the baseball coach. He was the basketball coach, and he was the track and field coach. In addition, he somehow managed to find the time to be a full professor in HPE. Carl passed away this summer at the age of 102, and it was a privilege for me to have known him for the 29 years that I've lived here in Portales. Well, that will wrap up an overtime, and that will wrap up an episode of Sportslook. I'd like to thank my guests, Kelly Lee and Jennifer Goebel-Poyer. I had a great floor crew tonight. I had a veteran as my floor director, Ms. Caitlin. So for all those aforementioned people, this is Doc Elder saying, so long.